The second of the 5 biological laws is known as the two-phase process of healing. What if many of the symptoms we have feared the most, like pain, fever, swelling, inflammation, the cysts, tumors, diarrhea, bleeding, and all tissue changes, were not signs that the body was diseased and failing, but signs that the body is moving through a meaningful biological process? This teaching offers one of the most revolutionary shifts in how we understand the body. In Germanic Healing Knowledge, founded by Dr. Ryke, Geerd, is that every biological program unfolds in 2 phases: the conflict active, daytime, and the healing phase, nighttime phase. To understand this more deeply, you can refer to Dr. Hammer's scientific chart, which outlines the biological programs, brain relays, germ layers, and corresponding organ tissues. These resources can be found in our other biological series of videos discussing the 5 biological laws and on the websites listed in the slide at Amici D. Dirk and learninggnm.com. The two-phase process diagram helps us see that the body does not behave randomly. It follows a precise biological rhythm, first adapting to a conflict and then repairing once that conflict has resolved. The first phase is the conflict active phase, when the conflict is running and the organ may be silently adapting. The second is the healing phase, when the conflict has resolved and the repair work that was waiting begins to unfold. Once we understand these 2 phases, symptoms are no longer seen as mistakes or frightening, but as part of a purposeful biological rhythm. Let's take a look at the 2-phase diagram to further understand the pattern of every disease. If you look to the left of the 2-phase diagram, you will see arrows pointing up and down. The top part, which is blue, of the diagram represents our daytime nervous system, and the red is our nighttime nervous system. The separation between the lines represents our sympathetic, our busy, active daytime schedule on the top, and on the bottom is the parasympathetic, the rest and recovery nighttime nervous system we see. We operate on a 24-hour circadian rhythm, which you are familiar with. When something happens, something occurs in our 24-hour cycle that is distressing. It catches us off guard and isolates us in that moment. It is called a DHS, a Dirk-Hammer syndrome. It is experienced as a biological conflict shock. At this time, we are caught off guard. The DHS, which shows in the first white triangle, is the split second when something unexpected hits you so fast, so sharply, and so personally within your psyche that your whole biology reacts before your mind even understands what is happening. This is not the same as stress from daily pressure. When this conflict shock hits, the body moves immediately into the conflict active phase, which is the long blue section in the graph. That is above the daytime line, and this instantly disrupts your normal day-night rhythm. Here is what actually unfolds in that moment. First, the psyche registers the shock instantly and silently. It takes a snapshot through your senses, through the psyche. Something happens that you weren't prepared for. It catches you off guard. You're caught on the wrong foot. You're isolated and alone. You can't stop thinking about it. You actually feel it through all your senses before you even think it. This could be a sudden loss, a betrayal, a threat, a challenge in your home or your business, known as a territorial challenge, a separation. It could be an argument that blindsides you. But in less than a heartbeat, your whole system says, this is serious, and I need to adapt now. From that split second forward, your nervous system goes into a high alert. Your hands and feet are cold. Your mind spirals around the conflict over and over again, and you can't think of anything else. You're unsettled, stressed, and unable to relax. You can't sleep, you're restless, and you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. Maybe you lost your job. Maybe someone special that you loved passed away. Maybe you had a fight that hit deeper than you expected. No matter the situation, the biology is always the same. It means that you entered in a sympathetic atonic phase, a conflict active phase. It means that in your body, your thoughts, your feelings, it is as if a tiger is chasing you. This is conflict active. The shock impacts a specific area in the brain. It causes a lesion that is instantly imprinted in the specific area of the brain. Take a look at the example of the brain scan above. This turns on the biological program, and the lesion is called a hammer foci. This is targeted brain formation in the brain that Dr. Hammer discovered in tens of thousands of brain scans. At the moment this lesion appears, we become conflict active. Our brain turns on one of three biological programs, and this appears on a cellular level. When a conflict shock hits us, the body instantly chooses one of the three adaptive responses. These responses are not mistakes. They're not diseases. They are meaningful programs designed to help us manage and resolve the conflict so we can return to living our life. Depending on where the lesion falls, we will either experience cell growth as a tumor, a cyst, or a nodule, or we can experience cell loss, as in skin or hair loss, bone loss, and the last adaptation would be functional loss, where we could lose our hearing or our eyesight, or even movement in our limbs. Let's look at each of these programs, these three programs. The first one is cell growth, cell multiplication. This is when the body adds cells somewhere, making an organ or a tissue temporarily larger or stronger. Think of this like nature adding extra hands to help you. A perfect everyday example is the menstrual cycle. Every month, a woman's uterus grows extra cells to thicken the endometrium. Why does this happen? In order to prepare the body to conceive and nourish a baby. If conception doesn't happen, the extra cells are no longer needed, and so they naturally break down and are released during menstruation. It is an incredible, meaningful biological preparation of cell growth with a purpose. The same thing happens during a conflict. If your biology perceives that you need more processing power, more strength, or more oxygen, it temporarily multiplies cells to help you adapt. For example, if you're experiencing something truly frightening, the kind of shock that takes your breath away, your biology may instantly respond by growing small lung nodules. Why is this? Because in that moment of fear, your body needs more oxygen. I need more space to breathe so I can survive this. The lungs temporarily add extra cells to increase the surface area and oxygen intake. And once the fear of the conflict is resolved, those extra cells are no longer needed. Nature has the cleanup crew for this called tubercular bacteria, TB bacteria. We're all familiar with this. They gently break down and remove the lung nodules, just like the body naturally sheds the uterine lining after menstruation. It is purposeful, intelligent, and designed to bring you back to balance. Cell growth always has a biological meaning. The same works for the liver. If you are engaging in a starvation conflict, your liver is going to grow extra cells to adapt, to help you to use up that space so that you can have more nutrients so you can survive longer. Let's discuss cell loss, necrosis, or ulceration. This is when the body removes cells by thinning or widening a tissue to help you in a conflict. It might sound alarming, but it's actually brilliant. An example of this would be skin separation conflict. If a child is separated too early from the breast, from mom, or from home, or comfort, the epidermis loses cells so that you become slightly numb. Now, we never notice this, but it actually happens. And once we reunite with mom, and this is when the healing phase takes place. This is when the skin shows up with a rash, or it becomes dry or flaky. This happens to help to soften the pain of the emotional separation. Within this conflict, memory loss occurs too, so that we can forget who we are separated from, or want to separate from. Now let's discuss functional loss, which is a reduced function. This is when the organ doesn't lose or gain cells. It simply underfunctions for a period of time. The organ becomes quiet or slower or less active so the person can cope. A simple everyday example of this would be a hearing conflict. If a child is trying not to hear something painful, like shouting, criticism, bad news, the hearing can temporarily underfunction. The ear becomes blocked and we do not hear very well. We see this often with young children who suffer ear infections because the pain comes in the healing phase once it is resolved. It is the body trying to protect the psyche, turning the volume down. Functional loss is a protective retreat, a way of saying, let me reduce this function while you navigate this solution. At the same time, this happens with the eye as a loss of vision. In all three cases, the body is helping you. Cell growth, cell loss, and functional loss. Every one of these programs is biologically meaningful. It is a temporary adaptation tailored to the type of conflict your psyche experienced, how you perceived it. Our body is literally hardwired for survival and is always helping us. It's important to understand that our body is not doing something wrong when we have symptoms. Nature, the universe, would never create that. Our body is always helping us. Once you find a solution and resolve this conflict, for example, you find a new job, you create peace with your spouse, then you will enter into a conflict resolution phase or the conflictolysis phase. Refer to the second white triangle at the beginning of the healing phase. This is your resolution. Following the resolution, we will enter into the post-conflict phase, which is the second of the second phases. It is the red section. Another two phases within the red section, they are known as PCLA and after the epicrisis, PCLB. Please refer to the red sections above. Just to recap, there are two phases. Phase 1, where you experience the DHS, so now you're in conflict active, as shown in the beginning, the blue area. And phase 2, the red areas, PCLA and PCLB, where you're in the healing. Between PCLA and PCLB is a quick epicrisis, which is very much like the conflict active. If while we're in conflict active and experience cell growth, and now resolve the conflict, we are going to break down those cells that we grew, and we experience pain, swelling, and inflammation with that, and this occurs with the help of bacteria, known as the warm or the hot phase. We usually experience fever. If we lost cells during the conflict active phase, we will replenish those also with the help of bacteria. There will also be pain, swelling, and inflammation. If we experience functional loss of an organ or a tissue, we will regain function. The PCLA is the healing phase. It is known as the sick phase, and this is where we experience symptoms like vomiting, blood, fever, coughing, runny nose, colds, earaches, blurred vision, swelling, achiness, sore bones and joints, pain in the intestines and diarrhea. It's where all the symptoms show up. And usually when we go to the doctor, because we don't know we are already in the healing phase. We don't always know what is occurring in the body when we are in conflict active, but we do know we have either cell gain, cell loss, or functional loss. It is until we experience the symptoms, because the symptoms tell us what conflict we have experienced. What is the flavor of the conflict? For example, if it was in the bones, we would know that it would be around a self-devaluation conflict that comes from the cerebral medulla. If it was a cold or a sinus, this would be a stink conflict or an annoyance conflict coming from the sensory cortex. If it's the gallbladder, we know it would be a territorial anger coming from the cerebral cortex. If there is pain in the intestine, this would be around an indigestible anger morsel, also coming from the brainstem. Symptoms from the reproductive organs would usually be a conflict around sexuality or procreation, survival of the species. This comes from the brainstem or the cerebral cortex. So our symptoms tell us what type of conflict we experience and what brain and germ layer. Our bodies are miraculous. As we reach the end of the PCLA, we arrive at a very important turning point in the healing process. This is known as the epicrisis. It's also called the epileptoid crisis. On the graph, this is the sharp pointy peak above the red area. It shows up in blue because it's very similar to the conflict active phase. Here is really what's happening. During healing, both the brain relay and the organ build up with edema and fluid. The swelling is protective. It cushions the brain and tissues. It supports the organs. It's the body's way of creating a soft, safe environment for repair. All healing takes place in a fluid environment. Halfway through the healing phase, the body no longer needs all that fluid, so it performs a quick, intense release, a kind of momentary push that squeezes the edema out. The squeezing, the final surge, is the epicrisis. It is a brief replay of the conflict active phase, but it's done in a controlled, biologically meaningful way. Most of the time it occurs at night, so we don't notice it. It is the body's way of saying, okay, let me finish this. Let's complete the healing. This is the moment where symptoms like seizures, migraines, or even heart attacks can occur. Many people experience small heart attacks without even knowing. But when the conflict load is so strong, a person can die from the quick healing of the epicrisis. There is nothing wrong with this time. It is very important because the system is pushing out the last bit of fluid and resetting itself. The release of the fluid must be strong enough to clear the brain and the tissue. The epicrisis is necessary, and it is not a mistake. It's actually a very profound part of healing. It's the peak, the turning point, the body's way of sealing the repair and moving into the final stretch of recovery. After the epicrisis, once the body has pushed out the excess fluid and completed the most intense part of the healing, we move into the phase B, also known as the PCLB. On this graph, this is on the right side of the red section. This phase is all about strengthening and stabilizing. Both the brain relay and the organ tissue now begin to scar over. It's the scarification phase. It is not in a harmful way, but in the same way as if you cut your skin and it forms a scab, that protective layer as it heals. The tissue is being reinforced, sealed, and made stable again. This is the final stretch of the healing. Your energy returns, warmth settles, your system is rebuilding itself with new strength, and as the repair completes, the body gently returns to normatonia. It is the natural day-night rhythm. This is when you begin to feel like yourself again, grounded and balanced. The PCLB is the moment of closure. The healing is complete and the tissue is restored. The entire psyche brain organ system comes back into harmony to bring the two phases all together. There is no change in the body, no symptom, no disease, no tissue shift without a corresponding change in the brain. Remember, every adaptation in an organ is paired with the hammer foci. That's the little bullseye ring in the brain that appears the moment of the DHS, and it's registered as that conflict shock. And why is this? Because the psyche, the brain, and the organs are all one unified system. They do not operate separately. They respond together. The DHS is interpreted by the psyche. It's recorded in the brain, carried out in the organ, all in perfect coordination like a dance. When you look at the diagram, you're not just seeing faces and colors. You're seeing the brilliance of your biology, the way your system is hardwired to protect you, support you, and guide you through every conflict and every healing. It's a reminder that your body is never working against you. It is always acting with intelligence, precision, and purpose, and helping you survive, adapt, and to return to balance. I would like to speak a little more on conflict resolutions. So when we speak about them from a biological perspective, we're not only talking about changing our thoughts. A true resolution happens when the psyche and the body finally feel that the danger, the pressure, the loss, the humiliation, invasion of a threat is over. Sometimes this comes through an actual outer change. Sometimes it comes through more concrete action. And sometimes it comes through an inner shift where the person finally just feels safe again. For example, a child who is repeatedly pressured to eat food she did not want can develop recurring throat symptoms. From this perspective, the food became a forced morsel, a morsel conflict, something she could not naturally accept or swallowing the morsel. The resolution is very simple and practical. The parents stopped forcing the food and allowed the child to eat voluntarily. Once the pressure was removed, the conflict was no longer active. Symptoms would be a sore throat or strep. Another example is a man who felt that his personal time was constantly being invaded by appointments and obligations. His free space no longer felt like his own territory. The resolution came when he stopped scheduling commitments during his free time and began protecting his boundary space. In this case, his marking of the territory was restored. He may experience a UTI. In a family situation, there may be an unconscious rule that everybody must stay together and separation is experienced as unsafe. When a daughter is finally allowed more freedom and the family accepted this change, the tension can be released. The body may then enter the healing phase, which can show up as symptoms such as skin flare-ups. Another example is an indigestible anger conflict at work, where a manager felt irritated and angry every time they passed an employee who was unsuitable for the role. When their last day finally arrived, the manager had the inner feeling, tomorrow I won't have to see this anymore. The moment of relief marked the resolution. The system had become digestible because it was finally ending. Writing can be another very powerful way to support resolution. When a person writes honestly about the conflict, they often begin to understand what the body has been holding. A letter does not always need to be sent. Sometimes writing the truth, reading it, and then symbolically releasing it by burning it or letting it go flowing in the water can help the psyche feel that something has been completed. The resolution happens when the body no longer perceives the situation as active, when we can laugh about it. The body needs to feel safe that it's over. I am safe, and I do not have to keep adapting to this any longer. Thank you.